So since you guys actually blew up the Monster X versus Conquest video, I decided, you know what? Why not actually make this a full detailed one, right? And this, probably won't be a series unless you guys actually do want it, but let's actually just talk about it. So, what if Monster X was in the Invincible verse? Now, obviously, we are going to take the IDW version of him, as again, he's just way more cooler, more badass, and just fits the verse entirely. And well, we're gonna do obviously some size modification. He's gonna be the size of, I guess you could say, a human, but maybe slightly tall. Let's make him 6 to 8 feet tall, right? And we'll say that when he turns into his Kaiser Ghidorah form, he's able to go full kaiju size. So yeah. Now, obviously, this guy would range from the planetary to solar system levels, quite obviously, as he's able to fight against Godzilla and even being able to knock back Space Godzilla with his optic blast or his optic gravity beams, and even injure monsters like Mothra with a simple blast. And so, with that being said, with him also being very adept at hand-to-hand combat skill as well, being able to withstand Godzilla's atomic breath multiple times, in fact, and even overpower it, I think it's very simple. He could fit in the Invincible verse, especially with his more sadistic and playful personality. Now, let's talk about it. I would have the Exilian Empire be rivals to the Viltrumites. And I actually don't think it would be that bad here either. Just in the fact that the Viltrumites do put themselves in kind of the same light as the Exilians and stuff like that. And well, the Monster X was supposed to be the Exilians' greatest weapon. So the way I would have it is that the Viltrumites and the Exilians were at war for years and centuries, even when Argol was on the throne. And well, the Viltrumites always had physical might, right? But the Exilians had technology that was capable of killing the Viltrumites. But getting tired of being, lacking in the physical department, they created Gigan and Megalon. And these guys would be able to not only take out Viltrumites by themselves, but could take out whole legions. And well, they would actually be able to conquer planets in the Exilian name and pretty much have them surrender automatically. And then the Exilians will go on to make the Scourge virus, which would wipe out a large majority of the population. However, they would have discovered that not every Viltrumite, would have died during this. And so, this is where they thought, nah, we ain't gonna let them rest just yet. So what they do is they take the skeleton of the extinct species of their planet, the most dominant species on there, that being Ghidorah. And so, using reverse engineering, or basically they Jurassic World it up, and lo and behold, and Monster X is born, a combination of Exilian and Ghidorah DNA. And so he's going to have, or he would have, a rivalry with Nolan, basically playing the same role as him, but from a more different perspective. You see, Nolan already knows how the Exilians are, and Monster X is very new to him, new to any Viltrumite at this point. So they don't know what he's capable of, which is a very good thing. And so I think Monster X and Nolan would definitely arrive on Earth at the same time, and so Cecil doesn't know who to properly trust. I could definitely see Omni-Man trying to feed him this information that the Exilians are no good, they're here to conquer the planet, and this is where, Monster X or Kaiser would be able to kind of show and prove himself to Cecil, possibly even working with Cecil. And well, this would earn Cecil's trust, as Omni-Man would now be in a different position. Now, this is where I am going to go into where there could easily be two timelines. And obviously there would be, because Invincible is literally a multiverse with infinite possibilities of like different marked variants, both evil and both good, and even some of the good ones likely have different stories. So with that being said, if this actually goes that way, how do I think this would go? Now, I'm going to call it verse A and verse B. So let's talk about verse A, which would be the main timeline, but would be some changes in verse B, obviously the alternate verse. Now, I think Omni-Man may actually join the Guardians a lot earlier, and it's very possible that he and Debbie do hook up, but I can actually see this being kind of an alternate case as well. So verse A, I see Omni-Man and Debbie still being together. Mark is still born, and Kaiser plays more of a, I guess you could say, somewhat of an antagonistic role or more of a troll role. I could definitely see him being around Debbie, actually, befriending her, which I think would actually be a funny thing because Omni-Man would definitely hate it, and maybe it will make him a little bit more aggressive. But overall, I don't really see it happening that way. Then we have Mark still being born and raised by, Nolan and Debbie still. But I do think when Mark is like growing up and he's fully capable of understanding, I could actually see Omni-Man trying to like manipulate him and maybe even gaslight him up a little bit to where he sees Kaiser as this enemy, how the Exilian Empire is, horrendous and stuff like that. And this could probably have Mark a little bit more confused and maybe more conflicted, as he could see Kaiser doing things that his father does, but probably at a much better rate, considering I definitely would have him more powerful. Now, in the secondary timeline, Kaiser marries Debbie. He sees that Nolan likes her, and he honestly makes a move on her far quicker, and well, they have their own child. Now you might say, wait, how is that possible? Now again, we don't question biology in Invincible, considering the fact that Omni-Man had a child with a bug, and then we also saw Oliver's wife, right? So we not even gonna question that. So we don't question no type of genetics, because again, everything seems to be compatible with everything and having babies left and right. So it is what it is. But it's very possible that in this timeline, Omni-Man may still have the same child, or Mark will still be born, but probably just to a different woman. It's very possible that this could probably make Omni-Man more aggressive towards Kaiser, maybe even trying to gaslight the Guardians into attacking Kaiser. However, I do think one part of this that will basically mess up Omni-Man, and I think from a more mental standpoint, is likely a battle with Mr. Liu. I could actually see Omni-Man's plan going longer in this one, because again, an Exilian is there, and an Exilian that is unpredictable. However, a shared point in this timeline is definitely going to be when Kaiser goes into his full Ghidorah form. And that is going to definitely set Omni-Man off. I think he'll definitely be enraged as well, because he has nothing against that kind of power. So I could actually see him using the Guardian's death, both timelines, mind you, to try and set up Kaiser, which I think would actually be pretty interesting, because this would actually be believable. Yeah, see, Cecil at this point in time, by the time, that Mark, or let's just say Ray Dow, or we'll just call him Dow. If Mark or Dow are born at this point, yeah, I could probably see Cecil believing this, because again, it fits the power level of Kaiser, him being able to capable, more than capable of doing it. However, if Kaiser is working with Cecil earlier, Cecil would be monitoring him. So he would be very confused if this is really happening. But I do think that if he is spending time with Debbie, and I think he would, I do think that it could likely be, Cecil investigates it a bit more rather than just jumping to conclusions that Kaiser did it, which Omni-Man would likely need to happen, because again, it benefits him if the entire planet does turn on Kaiser, meaning the Viltrumite invasion could go pretty well. Now, believe it or not, depending on both timelines here, it is very possible that Omni-Man still gets found out while either Kaiser is either doing his own thing, or hear me out, Omni-Man would try to assassinate him, but gets absolutely just pulverized during the fight. So it's very possible that
In timeline A, he tries to assassinate him when he tries to like surrender and try to make his name clear. Or in timeline B, he tries to go for his family along with a much more easier and much more corruptible Mark, or a much more willing and a much more corrupted Mark in this timeline. So this does mean that Kaiser's gonna literally stand on business regardless. And well, believe it or not, one or two things could happen. He either kills them both here, or they both just wind up getting beaten and locked up on Earth. It really does depend. Now, in the main timeline, I could definitely see if Kaiser is like locked up, Omni-Man may just try to like kill him in whatever cell he's in, but that's obviously not going to work here because, you know, you free him, it's kind of done at that point. And well, Omni-Man's getting beaten up. And believe it or not, I kind of see Mark trying to stop him. And then I could also see him and Mark tag teaming Kaiser, as I think Mark would still likely believe his father. However, when it's revealed that he's the one that did it, I could actually see Mark apologizing to him and, well, swinging on his father. But Omni-Man really wouldn't get the chance to basically beat Mark at this point because Kaiser and him would be tag teaming. This means that Chicago never gets destroyed, the massacre really never happens, and well, Powerplex would never be born in this timeline. So again, he would just never be. Now, this is where we get another shared point in this timeline. So in timeline A, Anissa would still show up and try to challenge Mark. And well, I do think Kaiser would be able to handle it. And if Kaiser goes to handle it, this means Mark is still on his date with Debbie. I'm sorry, not Debbie. Amber. But in timeline B, he would have to really handle it because, again, he would be the strongest life form on Earth. And so in timeline A, this means that Mark is ultimately spared his Anissa fate. Like, I could actually see those two being a couple at the end of the day. Like, in all honesty, I think they fit each other. Anissa likes to fight. Kaiser also likes to fight. They both get a little bit of a sadistic kick out of just simply wailing on each other. And I think they would just get freaky afterwards. So it is what it is. So that means in timeline A, they fight, they get it on. Anissa likely leaves pregnant. So it would be kind of an is what it is moment. But again, that's just kind of how, you know, Viltrumites get down, or at least that's how she gets down. We know Lucan and good old harem master Craig are just completely built different. But she built for a lot of different things. But that's besides the point. Now, in both timelines yet again, or at least in the timeline B, where he's married to Debbie, he pretty much would just beat the mess out of Anissa, and she would have no choice but to retreat. And this is where, again, in the same shared point, another shared point happens, and that is Conquest. Now, either way, Conquest dies here. There is no way. Because in the timeline A, he and Mark are going to make sure he is taken out quickly. And I can actually see in timeline A, he trains Mark to actually be a lot stronger, considering, you know, it's a much stronger opponent and stuff like that. So yeah, he trains Mark to be stronger and a lot faster, meaning that if Mark can one-on-one Conquest by himself and actually push Conquest to actually try, having Kaiser there just ultimately, you know, gets him torn apart. Now, at this point, I do think in the A timeline, Anissa will come back and express that, you know, she is pregnant and she found this out. And now she's a tad bit scared that if the other Viltrumites find out, they'll kill her. Then in timeline B, Debbie would likely be on her, I'm going to say third child, because again, humanity just has something that just pulls aliens in on Earth. We know why. She and, you know, if she and Nolan were just getting it on like that, I think that Kaiser and her would probably be doing the same thing. It is what it is. But believe it or not, I do think in both timelines, Thrag does show up. I do think a lot of the more Viltrumite stuff does happen. And, well, believe it or not, if Omni-Man and Mark do manage to escape Earth in Timeline B, I could likely see them teaming up with Thrag. But this does mean a lot of the Coalition planet stuff does change, as again, Oliver's likely not born in this timeline unless Omni-Man still goes to Thraxa. And Mark is just much more evil here, so this does mean that some of the stuff does happen, like the planet of Viltrum being destroyed, and it's very likely that the Viltrumites still do go to Earth, but this means that instead of making a deal with Omni-Man and Invincible, they would have to make a deal with Kaiser. And this would actually mean that Kaiser would ultimately, take the deal. But this does mean that he is actually able to live peacefully with Anissa and their child. And this likely does mean they would probably have another one as well. And if he and Debbie are there and just living their days, it's very possible they'll be on their third child at this point. Or again, they'll probably just stick with the two and just kind of keep it a little bit safer than normal. But then again, it's probably the fact that they're going to have three. But this is also where I would have another share point, and that is the Exilians actually trying to wipe out the Viltrumites on Earth and actually using Gigan and Megalon to try and do their, own thing here and just start attacking cities that have Viltrumites. So I do believe that Kaiser would definitely see that, okay, you know what? Maybe my own people really ain't down like that. So I could actually see him not only taking down Gigan and Megalon, but forcing them to submit to him. This does mean that it's very possible the Supreme Commander would try to come down and Kaiser will likely kill him and just kind of usurp that kind of throne. But this does mean that eventually we are going to have to get that final battle between him and Thrag. Now, depending on how it goes, it's very possible that Omni-Man's mentality does kind of change at some point, but it's very possible that Invincible as well does at some point. But either way, in both of them, in both timelines, this is going to end with Thrag's death. Now, if it's in Timeline A, I could actually see Invincible being thrown off of Thrag as they go into the sun, with Kaiser straight up grabbing Thrag and steamrolling him right into the sun before just tearing him in half and just kind of exiting like nothing happened. Now, if Anissa does die to the whole Ragnar thing, then that does mean Kaiser would go on to raise his children on his own and possibly just kind of rule the Exilian Empire, or possibly just, fall in love with somebody else and then eventually just have more children along the way. But if Anissa survives, they both would go to rule the Exilian Empire together. But in Timeline B, he would remain with Debbie and find a way to prolong her lifespan so that they could honestly just live together forever. Now, again, this is where I honestly would end it off, but let's just talk about Kaiser as a villain for just a couple, seconds here. If he was a villain, then the entire verse would get wiped out. There's nothing stopping the Exilians from conquering Viltrum. They might just destroy it automatically with just him, because again, he would be a surprise weapon. And then Earth would get conquered and they would be able to do nothing about it. But that's going to be all today, you guys. Be sure to comment down below, like and subscribe and share it with your friends. This is Legendary Grimlock, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And let me know if you guys want this to be another What If series. Peace.